Alright guys, so we're going to actually create an RDS instance, which is a relational database service instance, and we're going to actually connect that instance to another database I have on-prem, right? Now, the database I have on-prem is an SQL Workbench. So this is a MySQL database I actually have on-prem. So I want to create an RDS instance in the cloud, right, in AWS, and actually connect to this. So let's get started. So to begin, right, I'll follow this documentation I have here, and the first step I want to do is to create a security group. So in that security group, I will allow inbound rules, right, for all traffic, right, and select any IPv4. So it means that anybody with an IPv4 IP can actually access this database, right? Then for outbound rule, we're going to leave it at the default. So I'll come here to my console and I'll search for security group. So this is security, right? So you can actually access security group from EC2 instances or security groups from VPCs. So I'll just choose this one here from EC2 because this is security group are actually attached to EC2 instances. So when I get here, right, I'll create a new security group. So I'll click on create security group here. Then I'll go back to my documentation and we're going to give the security group a name DB Connect example. So I'll copy this to Control C. I'll come here and I'll come to the name here and we'll give it this name, right? Then for description, I'll say for RDS instance connection to on-prem database, right? Then I'm going to leave it at default VPC, right? Then for inbound rule, I'll add a rule and I'll select from all traffic. So I want anybody to be able to access this database. Then for the custom source, I'll select any IPv4 under source here, right? You can see that I remove from custom to any IPv4. So I know I need anybody with IPv4 CIDR to actually access this, right? Then for the outbound rule, I'm going to leave it like so here, right? Then I'll click on create security group. So we have created our security group, right? And the name of our security group is DB Connect example. So the next thing we want to do, right, is to go to our console and search for ARA and RDS and navigate to that service. So I'll come here and this time around, I'll search for ARA and RDS. So if you come here, this is the service, right? Or just search for RDS, right? Then I'll open this on another tab also. So when we get here, right, we want to actually create a database, right? So in our documentation here, right, the first thing we want to do is to click on databases at the left side of the console and click on full configuration. So if you come here, right, and you click on databases at the left side here, right, and you click on create database here, this is the data create database dashboard, right? So we're going to actually create this database using our full configuration, right? Then if you come back to documentation here, right, the first thing to do is to select my SQL under engine options because I want to actually connect to this database, right? Engine, right? And under engine version, I'm going to select the version that corresponds with my SQL version for compatibility, right? For example, my SQL version 8.040. So what this means is that if I come here, right, because I want to actually connect to a MySQL database on-prem here, right, I have to select a MySQL engine here because this is what I want to connect to, right? So I need to actually select that engine, right? Then for the engine version, right, now you can leave your own version using the latest version, right? But for me, right, this is an old MySQL Workbench I have here, right? So I actually want to just select the version I have right on-prem. So I will just come here. Now you can leave this like so, right? You're not going to have any issue, right? So I'll just come here and come to 8.0.40 here, right? And select this version. Now you can leave it at the latest. You're not going to have any issues, right? But for me, I just like to select a version of the application I have on-prem with what I actually using in the cloud, right? Then the next thing we want to do here is in the template, we're going to select free tier, right? So if I come here, we're going to select free tire here because we are just using this for learning purposes, right? Now, in real life, you want to actually select based on the business requirements. So the business requirements is telling you to use it for a development or testing environment, you select dev or test. If a production environment, something that you want to use for high scale, you select production, right? Now notice that when you selected production, you can see that the multi-AZs actually opened up, which means for high availability, right? You can see that they actually opened up for the production and the dev. But for the free tire, you can see that it's just one easy, right? So it's understandable because you're on free tire. So AWS is not actually going to spread your instances across multiple AZ, right? For cost issues. Now, in my documentation, the next thing is to give your database a name, right? So for us, we're going to give our database tutorial database 1, right? So I'll just copy this here. We Control C. I'll come here back and I'll remove this and I'll paste this here, right? I'll just add one here. So this is name of our database, right? Then the next thing we want to do is for the admin, right? For the master name, I'm going to use it as leave it as admin. So for the master username, I'm going to leave it like so here, right? Then under credential management, you can decide to use secret manager. Now, secret manager is a secure way whereby you don't have to actually put your code in the application you're actually building it on, right? Which is secure, but it's more expensive, right? But for us, I'm going to click on self-manage, right? Then I'm going to click on this auto-generate password so that AWS will just suggest a password for us, right? Now, if you don't want that, you can unclick this and actually input your password here, right? But for me, I'm just going to click on auto-generate password here, right? Which was what was stated in my documentation here, right? Now, the next thing is we can do here is to come down here and under the instance type, we're going to choose the family type of this engine, right? Of this instance, right? Now, remember that when you're dealing with instance type, we have different type of instance type you can choose from, right? You can choose a big T3 micro, which means this is a general purpose instance. You can choose something more specific for CPU usage, for storage, for accelerated compute, or what you have me, right? But for me, I will choose this small T3 micro here because this is for learning purpose. Now, know that the higher the instance type, right, or the family type, the more cost it's going to actually incur for you, right? So if you come back to my documentation, the next thing I want to select is a general purpose SSD for lower RDS cost, right? So I'll come here and I'll select general purpose SSD here, right? Which you can actually select SSD GP2 or SSD GP3, but for me, I like to use this, right? Because in terms of cost, it is actually more flexible than the provisioned or the magnetic, right? So I'm going to just leave it as this like so here, right? Then if you come down here, under connectivity, we are not going to connect to EC2 instance, right? This is for learning purpose, right? Then for network type, we're going to leave it as IPv4. For the VPC, we're going to leave it like so here. And in the security group here, for the subnet, right, we're going to leave it at this default subnet here, right? Then this is very important, right? This is very, very important. If you come to my documentation here and you come down here, you can see that under the public access, we have to select CS because we want the RDS instance to connect to our MySQL database on-prem. Now, if you don't select CS, right, we are going to find it very difficult to actually connect to your database. So we're going to select CS, right, because we want to actually connect to this database, right? Then for the security group, right, we are going to come here and select the security group created. Now, if you come here, remember that this is security group created, and the name of our security group is DB Connect example. So I'll come here and search for DB Connect example. And this is the security group, right? So I'll click on it and I'll remove this default here, right? So this is the security group we're going to actually use, right? Then the next thing we want to do is to locate additional configuration and locate backup and uncheck the enabled automated backup box, uncheck the enabled encryption box and all boxes that might incur extra costs, right? So I'll come here and I'll come down here to additional configuration, and this is the port, right, we're connecting to, which is the natural port for MySQL databases, right? Then I'll come down here and actually uncheck all these boxes that might actually incur extra cost for me, right? Because I don't actually need all this, right? Because we're actually doing we're trying to learn, right? Then I'll come down here and I'll click on create database. So our database is creating, right? So what we're going to do now is that we are going to actually wait, right? We're going to actually wait for this, right, to actually finish creating. So when the status change from creating to available, we'll come down to finish what we are actually doing, right? So on the meantime, right, you click on this connection details here, right, and you can see your password, right, and your username. So this is very important for us because we're going to actually use this connect to our MySQL database. So I'll copy this, right, and I'll paste it somewhere safe, right? Then when this finish creating, we're going to come back to actually continue from where we actually stopped. Okay, now our database status has changed to available, right? The next thing we want to do is to actually connect this database, right? So the first thing we want to do is to click on the database name URL and click on the connectivity and security tab, and also click on endpoints, locate the endpoint and port, and copy the endpoint URL for your database. So I'll come here, right, and I'll click on this database name here. Then when I come here, right, I will locate endpoints here, right? So I'll click on endpoint. And if you come down here, you can see that we have an endpoint and ports URL, right? So this is the ports, the URL endpoints, right, for our RDS instance, right? So this is what we're going to use for to actually will connect to our MySQL database, right? So the next thing we want to do is to open your MySQL Workbench, right, on your computer, and click on the MySQL connection plus button to create the connection. So if I come here, I'll copy this endpoint here, right? Now note that when you come to connectivity here, you have to come to endpoints here because you have for cloud share, you have for code snippet. So you want to use endpoint. So you click on endpoint before you actually see the endpoint URL here, right? Then I'll come to my SQL Workbench here, right? And I'll come to connections here and I'll click on this plus button here to create a new connection, right? So when I come here, I can give this connection a name. I can just say tutorial connection, right? Then I'll come to host name here. Now, if I come to host name, I'll remove this, right? Then I will paste the endpoint URL which I copied, right? You can see that I copied this endpoint URL here, and when I came to my SQL Workbench here, I actually pasted it here, right? Then the next thing we want to do is to go back to our documentation, and you can see that in when you come here, right, after pasting it, right, under username, we're going to change our name from root to admin because that was the name that we actually set it in RDS, right? So I'll come back here to my SQL Workbench and I'll remove these roots here and put admin, right? Then for the password, I'll click on this store in vault, right? Then I'll go to where I pasted my password, where I actually saved my password, right? So I'll copy this generated password from AWS, right? Then I'll come and actually paste it here, right? Then I'll click on OK, right? Then the next thing we want to do is to go back to my documentation, and in my documentation here, right, after doing all this, we're going to click on test connection, right? So if your connection is successful, you have it successfully you made the MySQL connection message on your screen, right? So if I come here, right, I'll click on test connection here, and you can see the message, right, successfully made the connection to MySQL, right? So if I click on OK and I click on OK again, right, you can see the connection here, right, and you can see the name of our connection. So if I click on this, it's going to actually open an editor for us, right? It's going to open an editor for us. So let us wait for it to actually open. So you can see this is my editor, right? So that's actually opened an editor for us in MySQL, right? So the next thing I want to do is to go to my documentation, and we're going to actually locate the connection we made through the name of our connection, which I've done, right? As well as the admin. Now you can see that here I actually gave it, I said we should use the name my RDS connection, but I actually changed it there, right? So if you use my RDS connection, you're still in the right path, right? Then we're going to actually open a new query tab where we can actually write SQL statements, right, to this connected RDS instance. So we're going to create a new database, right? So we're going to run the script below, right? Create database, my database, my example DB database, right? So I'll just copy this and I'll come to my SQL here and actually paste this here. Right, so this is database we're creating, right? So if I highlight this and I run this, you can see we have successfully created our database in RDS, right? Then the next thing we again want to do is to actually use this database, right? So we're going to use these scripts, use example DB, right? So I'll copy this again. I'll come here and I'll paste it here, right? And I'll highlight this and actually run it. You can see now we are using this example DB database, right? The next thing again I want to do is to actually add items, right? I want to add items to this database, right? So I can just copy this SQL script here, Control C, come here, right? And we want to actually add an item to our employee, right? So you can see we're going to create a table called employees directory. We're going to create an integer data type and create the data type for the name, right? So I'll come here. Let me just add this. Then I highlight this and I'll run this. And you can see we have actually done that. So this is how you actually create an RDS instance, right? And actually connect to a database. So if you like this video, don't forget to share, don't forget to subscribe,